Hello, everybody. This is Daniel Finfoley, Senior Analyst for Energy Storage of GTM Research. I'd like to welcome you to our webinar, One Size Does Not Fit All, Complexities, Use Cases, and Trends in Energy Storage, presented by NEXTracker. Absolutely thrilled to be here with you today. We've got a great audience and really just want to get through things quickly so that we can get to the presentation itself. A couple quick notes about the audience console and the mechanism of the webinar itself. Within the On24 platform, you'll see a couple of functionalities. Obviously, the slide deck will be one of the more important ones. In addition, you'll be able to look at speaker bios, links for other items as well. One place I'd like to draw your attention is to the question button. If you can submit your questions in the bottom left, we would love to hear from you. We've designated some time at the end of the webinar to go through any of your questions, and anything that we won't be able to get to, we'd be happy to follow up directly. We've got a great panel here today. With us is Brian Urban, Executive Vice President of Leclanche, North America. Brian, maybe you could correct my pronunciation on the name of the company as well. Joshua Weiner, for Storage Integration Director for NEXTracker. Janice Lynn, California Energy Storage Alliance, founder and CEO of Strategen, and myself. This is a really exciting topic. If I hadn't been moderating this panel, definitely would be attending it as well. So one last thing I wanted to bring up before we dive in. Since you are on the webinar with us, you are able to get a 15% off code with the code webinar for all of GTM's current and upcoming events, including our new event, the Blockchain in Energy Forum 2018 in New York in March. We also have our Solar Software Summit and concurrent Solar Summit 2018 in sunny San Diego. I'm hopefully looking forward to that, get out of this cold snap here in Boston. We also have the Grid Edge Innovation Summit in San Francisco in June, our second U.S. Power and Renewable Summit in Austin, Texas in November, and then, of course, the Energy Storage Summit in December. We just had that in December 2017. It was a great event, and we really look forward to seeing everybody there. So before we dive into our webinar topic today, I wanted to give some quick context for the market and what sort of opportunity we're looking at here. The title itself here, One Size Fits All, the various complexities, use cases, and trends in energy storage, is incredibly appropriate because we really are seeing a nascent market with a variety of ways to make money and make a difference in this market. Looking quickly at the historical deployments over time in megawatt terms, our Q3 2017 deployments, we saw an increase of 46% over previous years according to the GTM Research tracked amounts. The market grew 46% year over year. And notably, behind-the-meter deployments accounted for 26% of total megawatts deployed. They actually accounted for 42% of all megawatts deployed in Q2 of 2017. So we're really seeing this market, including residential, becoming pretty significant in terms of driving deployments. You can see a bit more of the history of the market here in terms of megawatt hours. Obviously, two very large spikes in Q4 2016 and Q1 2017, driven by procurements to respond to the Aliso Canyon natural gas leak. These were 4-hour duration systems that were really, as you can see here, disproportionately large compared to the market so far. Really was a proof of concept moment for energy storage, and the industry stepped up in a big way. We've also seen lots of 2-hour systems come online in the non-residential space and the residential space, and we expect to see this market developing and growing further. A brief look at our forecast, which we're updating now, so please do watch this space in the future. We anticipate annual deployments reaching 2.5 gigawatts by 2022, and we'll be updating these numbers for 2023 with our latest energy storage monitor here at GTM Research. Behind-the-meter deployments, that's residential plus non-residential, are going to make up half of the market by 2021. So we're really excited to see how these different markets intersect and build off of each other. In terms of dollar values, we see energy storage being a $3.1 billion market by 2022. And that's incredibly exciting. 5 years ago, if you had talked about energy storage in these sort of terms, it would have been tough to swallow, but based on the cost declines that we've seen, the innovative business models that have come out and that are going to be discussed on the call here today, this really is a market that is not really emerging anymore. It has emerged. utility space will continue to be a big driver of this growth, but increasingly non-residential and then residential is going to be a big factor as well. So with that said, I really just want to get out of the way and let our panelists talk about the insights that they're seeing in energy storage and solar right now. So with that, I will hand it over to NEXTracker. And yeah, please remember to ask your questions, and team, feel free to take it from here.
So hey, Dan, why don't we go ahead and go to get to Brian. He's our first speaker.
Sounds great.
Or Jack, or Janet. Sorry.
Or Janet.
Janet.
Good morning. This is Janice Flynn. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Strategen and the co-founder and chair of the California Energy Storage Alliance. And I'm so pleased to be here. Thank you for inviting me to join you this morning. Just by way of introduction, the California Energy Storage Alliance was the first organized advocacy group to represent storage in the power sector, founded by Strategen in January of 2009. And while we represent storage, what I tell folks is we're an entirely mission-driven organization. And you can see here we're now a 501c6 nonprofit, and we're committed to advancing the role of energy storage in the power sector, and more importantly, to establish a cleaner, more affordable, reliable grid in California. The other thing that's worth mentioning about CESA is we believe strongly in diversity and competition. So we support all forms of storage, from very large bulk pumped hydro to very teeny tiny aggregated battery, thermal, mechanical storage, as well as EV charging, mobile storage in the power sector. We also support and encourage all forms of ownership and business models. So for my brief remarks, what I plan to cover is, at a high level, the amazing opportunity that's happening here in California and how it's relevant for the rest of the world. I'll conclude with some high-level remarks on the connection to what's happening here to global trends, and also provide some information where you all can find out more. So that's what I hope to cover. Who you see here on our slide, this is our 17 board members. They are certainly the movers and shakers in grid storage in California. So I love this slide because this is why we do what we do. It's why I jump out of bed every morning. I say the future of California's energy grid is going to be highly renewable, highly flexible, and I should add highly reliable. It would be fabulous if we could say this about every place in the world, and I'm happy to report is that it is certainly a trend, renewables and storage. So let me explain first by doing a little bit of a deeper dive on California. So as some of you may know, California has very ambitious clean energy, GHG, and storage goals historically as a state. We are now in the midst of our Integrated Resource Plan, also known as the IRP, and under the now adopted Reference System Plan by our Public Utilities Commission is recommending approximately 9,000 megawatts of utility-scale PV, about 1,100 megawatts of additional wind, on top of 16,000 megawatts on additional rooftop PV. Okay, so this is all to achieve a 42 megaton 2030 GHG reduction goal. And what this corresponds to is approximately a 57% IRP, a little bit higher than what we have statutorily on the books. And I'll just draw your attention to this slide. This little sliver of purple is what the PUC recommended for storage, approximately 1,200 megawatts of storage deployed by 2030. What's really awesome about this effort, it is one of the first most comprehensive and robust integrated resources plan efforts undertaken to date. Very hard job, and I'd like to commend our PUC for the amazing task that they've undertaken. They're doing a great job. Some of the suggestions we have for going forward is to look at potentially an early gas retirement. You'll notice in 2030 there's still approximately 30,000 megawatts of gas assumed in the fleet. Secondly, considering extreme weather, kind of extreme is now the new norm. Third is an even lower storage cost case. One of the trends that I think cannot be underestimated is what's going to happen to costs going forward, especially with what's happening in China and the growth of EV charging. And fourth, the PUC is planning to look at higher or different use cases of behind-the-meter PV and EVs, and that would be for our 2019 reference case. But all very exciting stuff. Moving ahead, I'm sure I give talks all over the world, and the one export that's most famous from California, it's not avocados or oranges, it is our duck. So everybody's heard about our duck. There's actually a whole fleet of ducks throughout the year. What I wanted to point out about this duck is that the 2020 duck has arrived early. In fact, in 2017, we have achieved a net load as low as what was forecasted for 2020. It was something on the order of about 8,400 megawatts of net load. That happened in 2017. And it is a good thing. This means that we are deploying more and more renewables and really way ahead of schedule of what we originally anticipated for renewables deployment. But what this means is this is making our grid a little more challenging to operate. So this is on the right, you see the CESA's monthly 3-hour upward ramps in megawatts. For 2016 and 2017, which is the dark blue and light blue, that's actual data. The orange and gray are forecasts, but we're looking at anywhere from a 7,000 to 14,000 megawatt upward ramp in a 3-hour period, and it's happening all year long. So this is very challenging for our grid operator. What it means is we need more flexibility in the system. On this chart, this is a overview of net load. It's kind of, you can think of it, a week in the day of CESA. This is May in 2017. This is a week in May, and you can see, we're kind of, clipping in. We got all this great renewable energy, and what this arrow is pointing to, this blue area, this is room for baseload generation. Now contrast that to what 2030 may look like. Under the under the PUC's IRP reference system plan, with all those wonderful renewables deployed, and this is what our new net load is going to look like. Very interesting. What you'll see is that there's pretty much no room for baseload generation anymore. Somebody took a look at this and told me that doesn't look like a duck anymore. That looks like a sawtooth monster. And I say, no, we can't call that a sawtooth monster. By the way, it's not only a spring or winter or fall problem, this is also a problem in 2030 in the summertime. You can see we still have this same sort of net effect, no room for baseload. I call it icicles of opportunity. Really hot in summer, we're going to take those beautiful solar icicles and be able to use them to flatten our load and optimize the power sector more generally. So this is a year-round opportunity. I do want to say something that, CESA is definitely not against any fossil resources. In fact, among our board members, we have quite a few peaker developers. Rather, we're saying that any resources on the system, whether it's gas, whether it's solar, whether it's wind, whether you're just looking at a wire solution, all resources need to be integrated and optimized with flexible resources. Storage is not the only flexible resource game in town. It integrates very nicely with demand response and load side management solutions. So I just wanted to make that point really super clear. Okay, and in my last couple minutes here, I just wanted to wrap up and bring this all home and talk about what this might mean for the world at large. It's very exciting what's happening here in California. We're just scraping the tip of the iceberg, so there's so much more to talk about. But generally, I think I would put it in 3 categories in terms of top storage trends and drivers. One is underlying global drivers. We talked about what we will be talking about shortly, how renewable energy is getting really, really cost competitive. Storage costs are certainly declining. I think there is a need and a driver for greater reliability and resiliency, and you achieve that through resource diversification. Earlier, Aliso Canyon was mentioned. That was a key driver in that procurement. Happy to take questions about that. We can't just rely on any one resource anymore. And finally, global awareness. It's an interesting factoid that last year, approximately 80 countries, these are individual countries, came to California to learn about what's happening in storage and why California is deploying storage and how they can start thinking about deploying storage and renewables in their markets too. The second big trend is, I call it technology application and innovation. We need solutions. Innovative new long-duration solutions, which we're going to hear about shortly. One of the things you'll notice from those net load curves I showed you is this isn't a 1, 2, 3, or 4 hour problem. We're going to need really long-duration shifting to take advantage of those icicles of opportunity. Another application trend that's happening, I call it hybridization. So we're now seeing deployed very successfully energy storage in combination and integrated directly in, for example, with existing gas peakers. I believe Edison won several awards for their hybrid gas peaker storage project in Southern California. And then finally, aggregation. We're really just starting to come to understand the value of aggregating many distributed assets, whether they're in front of the meter, behind the meter, and that you don't need a one-to-one solution. In other words, if you have a particular need, you can achieve that need with a portfolio of many solutions, and that may be a more efficient way to achieve it through software and smart controls. Finally, it's hard to pay for all this great innovation and take advantage even of the lower cost underlying equipment if you can't find a way to pay for it, if you can't find a way to be compensated. So the final category of key trends is planning and procurement innovation. And that's in the area of how do we value the multi-value stacking benefits of storage. How can you take advantage of multiple benefit streams from one asset deployed at a particular place? And how can we proactively consider, as public utilities commissions, as planners, as industry in California, elsewhere around the world, how can we proactively consider storage as an alternative or complement to status quo solutions? So a non-wires alternative, thinking about local capacity, reliability. A couple months ago, it was announced that California was looking to procure storage and other preferred resources in lieu of RMR contracts with existing fossil plants. So there's a lot of exciting things happening, and I just want to wrap up by saying we've only scratched the tip of the iceberg. If you'd like to learn more, we have 3 upcoming events. One is for our CESA members on February 28th. This is a private stakeholder meeting in California here in Berkeley. We've been doing it for 10 years, and this is kind of like ground zero for where the California market is created. We will be debuting, and the press release, actually you guys are the first to know, press release is going out tomorrow, I believe, on a new Solar plus Storage Summit powered by Strategen and ESI. This is an event specifically focused on solar and storage, and it's going to be co-located at the SPI's International California Solar Expo at the end of March in San Diego. And then lastly is our international flagship event, Energy Storage North America, which will be November 6th through 8th in Pasadena. And that show also covers EV charging extensively. And then finally, the last thing I'll mention is if you want to learn more about recent procurements in California or the Aliso Canyon procurement that was mentioned a little bit ago, we have produced 2 short 5-minute videos that are available on YouTube. Just do a search for Strategen YouTube, and then you can hear the voice of the stakeholders who are involved and a little more backstory on both of those historic procurements. Thank you, and I look forward to the questions.
Thank you so much, Janice. Really looking forward to that Solar Plus Storage Summit. Could not be more timely, and don't think that I didn't notice the little pun on co-location there. Intentional or not, it really made my day. So yes, thank you again, Janice. From there, I think we'll be handing things over to Brian. So Brian, take it away.
Great, thanks. This, again, Brian Urban. I am the Executive Vice President for Leclanche, which is the correct pronunciation for our company, located in Dallas. Our company, just to give you a quick background on Leclanche for those that don't know, we're a Swiss-based company, and we have operations in North America as well. But we've been, I would say, in the energy storage business for quite a while, about 100 plus years. And so the company has been doing battery storage systems for, I guess over a century now. So we consider ourselves one of the original pioneers. We do have not only produce our own batteries, but we integrate and produce turnkey solutions for both stationary systems, which represent much of what we'll talk about today, but also we're involved in the e-transport sector, and I'll touch on that a bit more as we go through this. We have both software systems for battery management and energy management systems, and we're, I would say, a heavy technical company in terms of our heritage with in the energy storage space for quite some time, with a lot of European technology and integration capabilities. A couple of just again a few areas that we see and that we are certainly active in, and we'll touch on some of these uses for energy storage. These are markets that we're particularly involved in: grids type systems, grid connected systems, which provide ancillary services, microgrids in island and remote locations that utilize both renewable energy systems and battery storage to provide full capacity for locations. Commercial, industrial, and we'll get a lot more into that as we talk today. The storage plus PV, solar plus storage systems, which Janice mentioned, and I think are becoming much more prevalent in terms of just an application, and likewise, we see distributed storage opportunities coming into the fold for both utilities and for industrial customers. As I mentioned, we're also involved in what we term as e-transport, and that's the electrification of vehicles. And our focus is primarily in industrial applications, where we're seeing electric buses, electric ferries, trams, electrification of warehousing equipment and materials applications, and all that tends to, now we see a big convergence of both the stationary side and this e-transport sector as more and more demands are on the grid for electric vehicles, not only EV commercial vehicles or personal vehicles, but also mass transit systems that are going to require significant amounts of grid capacity. That's an area that we're now focusing on, and that is battery-based EV charging systems. That's an important element that puts less stress on the grid and allows for applications for a broader reach for EV charging. Along those lines, I think we're involved in a large project across Trans-Canada Highway, and to do that specific task across about 3,400 kilometers. So, all in all, we're very active across the gamut of where energy storage systems are being deployed, and hopefully with that we'll have over probably 100 megawatt hours of capacity in operation in 2018. So, quick snapshot on Leclanche. We're going to cover today in my area a case study in particular around commercial and industrial applications. I think as Dan mentioned earlier, that has been probably the largest sector of the battery storage systems that have been deployed recently. A lot in California and other parts of some other parts of the U.S. We're seeing it clearly globally, not only in North America, but we're active in Europe and Asia as well, where commercial industrial customers are looking for ways to reduce their costs and their power requirements, and often that takes into consideration reducing and eliminating peak demands on their system. We're also going to kind of be a little more specific in an opportunity that we're involved in Canada, which has some unique qualities for their peak shaving. typically what you've seen in just these are fairly straightforward slides, but in commercial industrial applications, the key is to eliminate those peaks, smooth out the demand on the system. And with the demand charges that utilities require, particularly for industrial customers that have very high peak requirements at certain times of the day or certain times of the week, it can be very costly to maintain those types of that type of power capacity within the grid system. So utilities will require certain levels of demand charges to compensate. And so battery systems in particular are very helpful in trying to shave off those peaks, and that's been a principal objective of many commercial and industrial applications, where you're seeing in this case, a 3,500 kilowatt peak. You add about 1 megawatt of battery capacity, and you can reduce that peak down to 2,500 kilowatts. So that small piece of time during the day that requires a large component of power can easily be shaped with battery storage capacity, and it provides a pretty good reference case and revenue case for these in certain regions of the country and certain regions of the world. This is they've been I would say, like I said, the most common utilization for storage in commercial industrials. It is regional, however, in terms of the requirements and the demand charge requirements by the utilities. So it does take different forms in different locations. The one that I'm going to focus on right now is what it looks like in Canada, and in particular in Ontario, which has a more unique, I'd say, demand charge requirement that takes a certain period of time just during the highest peak days of the year, and applies your utilization towards those times when the peak is the highest across the whole system, and you have a requirement to fulfill that peak, or you're charged a certain portion of that peak cost across as an industrial customer. And so in this instance, you'll see that we aren't really shaving the peak of the demand, but we're shaving and reducing the requirement during the hours that the grid has its peak. So an industrial customer may have its peak during the middle of the day, but the grid typically has a peak towards the 4 to 6 o'clock hour in the evening, and that's the most critical time where a battery system provides a alternative for the industrial customer. And in this case, you're not shaving just the peak, but you can actually displace the whole power requirement. So there's a larger range of displacement ability, and provides the economics, strong economics to support the storage systems. So in this slide, you're seeing the battery really comes into play for just a 2-hour period for the day, but it replaces the whole load during that time. And then after that period of time, the battery charges overnight and is available for utilization going forward for the next day, or for further deployment of energy arbitrage during the night. A particular project that we've seen and being involved in, the scale in Ontario, and in particular, they've reduced the scale to which customers are classified as Class A, which is a large-scale industrial. And in 2017, that classification went originally from 5 megawatt hours, or excuse me, 5 megawatts of load down to 500 kilowatts of load. So suddenly there was a large group of potential customers that now were facing an even larger demand charge requirement in terms of what's called the global adjustment charge. And so that opened up an even bigger window for commercial industrial customers to look at and to deploy storage assets to solve those problems. We've addressed it at Leclanche by looking for a more standardized size and scale of a system that we can use as a building block. In our case, it's 1 megawatt and about 2.5 megawatt hours of capacity, battery capacity added to that. As you see, we've worked with NEXTracker to design a kind of building block system, containerized solution that can be deployed for customers that are in that range of 1 megawatt plus in load. And in this case, just have a quick overview, the system requirements, and there's a little snapshot down in the lower right corner of the slide that talks about what the system peak is at any particular time. And this was a example of 2017 where there was peaks around 23,000 megawatts on the system. And if you're a customer with 2 megawatt load at that time, you had a small percentage of the overall load, but a meaningful one when they apply a $12 billion cost to that system. So your small percentage becomes a fairly large number in terms of a demand charge. In this case, about a little over $1 million Canadian for your demand charge at a 2 megawatt system. So the ability to shave that or reduce that significant demand charge is, again, a perfect application for battery storage systems that, in this case, really need to be deployed for 1 to 2 hours on 5 to 10 days a year, and to reduce this one component of the demand charge. The customers are charged this for the 5-hour peaks during the whole year. So it's not a large deployment, or not a large application, but a costly one at that. So that's a quick snapshot of what I would term as a very good application for storage systems in commercial industrial. It's very active in the Canadian market, in particular Ontario, where you're seeing this. Many industrial customers consider this. There is balancing going on in the system with these units and these batteries to, again, soften the load during those really critical peak times. And it's another one of many types of applications. I think that there's no perfect application or no perfect battery or storage solution for each application. It's certainly not one size fits all. There is each time we get into a project, there's always a very strong consideration of what makes the most sense. And we like to take time to look at ways to bring down the costs, make the battery or storage systems more effective. That has included, in our case, doing hybrid systems even with other types of battery or storage systems, flywheels, and particularly other compressed air, things like that. There's ways to balance both the battery systems and more longer-term storage or more fast-reacting storage to fit a project with the right dynamics of technical solutions. So that's a lot said. I want to pass it on now to Josh, and he can talk a little bit about NEXTracker. And like I said, we've partnered with NEXTracker on some of our projects, designing a system that could be easily deployable.
Hey, thank you, Brian. And by the way, I just have to say, it's really a pleasure to be working with you and Leclanche. 100 years in energy storage, how many companies can say that? I think it's just really validating when sophisticated folks like yourself, who've seen so many technologies and products deployed and understand the issues and how these things get built and shipped and installed and commissioned, I think it just speaks volumes of our working relationship. So thank you. For everybody, I mean, I'm just by means of introduction, I'm Josh Weiner, Director of Energy Storage at NEXTracker. My role here is really, it's to get the best-in-class, state-of-the-art technologies and configurations and solutions to the market as cost-effectively and as expedited, accelerated as possible. So, I'm in everything here from requirements, specifications, and policy development, product development, project development, product design, engineering. I'm really excited to talk about the solutions that we're going to be presenting today. Just like Leclanche, I mean, we really took a really holistic approach to the entire market, to where solutions fit best and how, and one of the advantages, of course, being a flex company is just how much of an impact in that space we can really make. It's really thrilling. So as you can see on the slides, I mean, we have a global footprint. One of my favorite parts of being acquired by Flex is how it's the opposite of vertical integration. I mean, we see a lot of vertical integration in the industry, and sometimes disintegration as well. But what I like about the Flex NEXTracker model is just how we're taking a more distributed manufacturing approach, which I think has all kinds of strengths that lends themselves to lower cost, collapsing delivery times. You have all kinds of benefit and advantages of local content sourcing. That's really unique in the industry to have that kind of a footprint and those advantages. So that's one part of the reason why we've able to contract and ship 11 gigawatts of trackers worldwide. That's not pipeline, that's contracted projects. And with 175 megawatt manufacturing capacity, we are shipping anywhere from 100 to 150 megawatts a week. That is actually happening, which has, of course, given us #1 market share for the last 2 years in the tracker space. So, I mean, this, the first thing we did, to leverage this capacity and to really, get the best solutions out to market and to customers who need them the most as quickly as possible, is to really frame the problem. And what we did is put together an RFP that we lovingly called Decapitate the Duck. And don't worry, Sierra Club said as long as it's not an endangered duck, it's okay. But essentially what we're doing here is defining really just 2 things. We're saying to the industry, and with help of Janice Lynn and CESA, I mean, it was phenomenal, the turnout and all the battery companies that participated. But we just said, come one, come all, bring your best-in-class, state-of-the-art, best and brightest widgets, what have you, and we're looking for 2 things. Lowest total cost of ownership for the system. Like, what can we put a tracker on that provides added value and lowers total system costs? We're not looking at components here. We're not looking at one part of the problem. We want to put the complete solution together, make this easy, simple, fast, cost-effective. That's the name of our game. And then, and it also provides a level of standardization. You talk to some battery companies, yeah, we cycle our batteries up and down 10,000 times a year, very good quality, very good performance. Then this other battery, we cycle it up and down 100 times a year, great quality, great performance. Well, we need to define the application that these systems are going in. This is, at least with the products that we're showing here and the solutions we're showing, these are not electric vehicles, they're not consumer products. There is obviously a lot of overlap in the technologies, but we want to define the problem and solve it and pretty much crush it into submission. So we looked at all kinds of technologies. We looked at several different types of lithiums, nickel, cobalt, aluminum, iron phosphate, nickel manganese, titanate, all kinds. Flow battery systems, zinc bromide, vanadium, different flavors of vanadium, iron, zinc iron, iron chrome. There's flywheels, there's ultracapacitors, advanced lead acid, lots of technologies participated, and this was more than, this was a full due diligence process. This is not looking at spec sheets and taking somebody's word on it. I mean, the essence of this is to find the right solution and to make that solution right. And that's, to me, the essence of validation and verification. Find the right solution and build the solution right. So that's our decapitate the debt RFP, and essentially what happened as a result of that RFP, it was an extensive test, and it's ongoing. It'll continue to be ongoing, and we're measuring actively round-trip efficiencies and degradation rates and collecting a lot of interesting and very compelling data that supports, ultimately, the product portfolio we settled on, which you'll see is a lithium-based system that we call NEXTracker Drive, and you see that in the middle of your screen there, as well as NEXTracker Flow, which is a flow battery-based system that you see on the far right. Going from left to right, I mean, NEXTracker, our claim to fame, the reason we're on the map at all was because we put together the first that we call NEXTracker Horizon self-powered tracker. It changed the tracker game forever. I mean, we took a distributed approach to distributed technology. In essence, we took what was traditionally tracker motors, for those of you who don't know, that moved a lot of steel and drive lines and moved blocks of megawatts of trackers. We essentially distributed that into far more efficient and smaller motors so that each row is effectively independent. And that's really important because you can do a lot of creative good things with software, like learn the topographical soil conditions and grades, so you can learn each row can tilt at different angles, and you can optimize performance and yield. We have a product called True Capture, which is a software-based solution that can yield anywhere from 2 to 6% yield just in the way you track the system very creatively and efficiently. And perhaps not so ironically, you can actually see on the image on the far left, there's a smaller solar panel that is actually powering a small lithium battery that is powering our motor and our motor controller. And that's amazing because you no longer have to run, of course, the obvious, you don't have to run wiring out to every single motor, but that was NEXTracker's entrance into storage. So we were actually in storage long before, and we're collecting quite a lot of data on those systems and learning quite a lot. And we're bringing all that knowledge and expertise to the storage platforms that we're putting together. So I'll talk about our NEXTracker Drive system, which is lithium-based, as well as Flow here shortly. But let me start with Flow, just because I would say in general, based on our conversations and experience, lithium is very popular. A lot of folks understand lithium. I'll go into some more detail, but Flow is a little less understood, so I'd like to just spend a little bit of time on that. So as you'll see on the screen here, the way we've designed this NEXTracker Flow solution is that, as I mentioned, each row is independent of every other row. You can almost think of it as one SKU. I mean, you have 90 panels on a row. It's got tracker, it's got motors and controllers, but it's also a motor, a controller, and then we can hang a battery off the end of the row. Literally, you drop 2 more I-beams, and the battery anchors to those I-beams, and it does so with a completely integrated drop-in-place, plug-and-play manner. This Flow battery, it ships wet, which is really critical. You don't have to pour electrolyte or fit packs into racks in the field. There's effectively no field work. You drop this thing in place. It has a DC-coupled ideal power inverter connected to it, and the DC strings of your PV array connect right into the inverter. And you're effectively done. I mean, some grounding and some wiring, and you're done. No other battery that we've found or seen or worked with can do this. I'm sure they will come in the future, and which is why we're going to keep our RFP open and always stay in touch with best in class. But as of right now, and for the foreseeable future, the Avalon vanadium Flow battery just comes with a lot of compelling benefits. It's, shipping wet, plug and play, drop in place. It's very flexible in duration, anywhere from 2 to 8 hours. Because it's a Flow battery, it can handle 100% depth of discharge. And it also experiences a very low capacity degradation rate, which is, this is almost unheard of. I mean, the nature of it is because in a Flow battery, and this is not true with all Flow batteries, there are hybrid Flow batteries, and there are also true flow batteries. The vanadium flow battery is a true flow battery where the entire electrical chemical reaction happens in a purely aqueous state. And because of that, all the modes of degradation in plates and metal plates that you would find in most conventional batteries, like in your car, for example, the lead acid battery in your car, lithium, et cetera, is that there's effectively no degradation as a result. It's pretty remarkable. We have units under test in the field right now that have been running for the equivalent of 10 years in service that have 0% degradation on them. And because of warranty and legal issues, we just say less than 1% to keep it clean. And that comes with a performance service agreement backed by NEXTracker, a Flex company, $25 billion company, with integrated EMS, cyber-secure NERC Zigbee wireless network. Also not a very prevalent, it's one thing to get systems in the ground, it's another to manage them securely and safely for the next 30, 50 years of their design life. As well as the controllers all integrated. So you see here we have the Horizon tracker with the Avalon vanadium flow battery and the Ideal Power bidirectional DC coupled converter. And it is the most, this is the name of the game here, or the lesson learned, is integration. I mean, this is a very simple, fast system to install. And it's quite simple. The solar generates energy, as you'll see here, charges the battery, and then the battery can discharge that energy right into the grid, DC to AC. So it's essentially, it's pretty straightforward. Something worth pointing out, though, that's actually unique about DC-coupled systems that may not be entirely obvious is just how more streamlined it is. I mean, with a DC-coupled system, and you can do this with lithium or flow, but we just found this is, the most cost-effective and fastest way to deploy solar plus storage in the field. DC coupling lends itself to, of course, fewer part counts. You have one inverter instead of two. That's less failures, less hardware, less cost. You also have less efficiency losses, with only going through one inverter instead of two every time the solar wants to charge the battery. You also recover clipping losses. By DC coupling the inverter, you can, we're designers and engineers in the biz, we're used to doing like 1.3, 1.4. We've seen 1.5, 1.6 DC to AC design ratios. And, for the first few years before the panels degrade, that is completely lost revenue. So we're able to recover that with the DC coupled system. And then finally, which is not entirely obvious,
just getting reports of some background noise. Sorry, apologies, Josh. All of our panelists could mute their lines. Thank you.
Oh. Thank you, Dan. So with the and this is not entirely obvious, but because of the nature of this configuration, for states that have NEM policy laws or rules, you can actually do some, we just actually announced this publicly with the CPUC only a few weeks ago, and all the California IOUs are on board, and we're looking to go nationwide with this soon. But basically, we're able to comply with a solar plus storage system by limiting the battery to only charge from the solar, which you can do with some simple firmware updates to the Ideal Power converter. And essentially, it acts like a relay. It can prevent the battery from ever charging from the grid. And when you do that, you do two amazing things. You comply with a lot of NEM policies and laws, which allows you to backfeed. This is not a non-export. You can actually export stored battery energy into the grid now, because every electron going into the grid came from solar. And in addition, won't the IRS love that? Because now, since batteries reap the 30% ITC, we're going to be able to securitize and make more robust the 30% ITC tax credit for batteries, especially when you have a utility or the CPUC with a approval saying, yeah, this is a system that only charges from solar, from a renewable source. And so you kill two birds with one stone. As far as I know, this is the only system that does that today, and it's built, it's designed, it works, it's great. We're seeing a lot of compelling interest just because of that. So just for some use cases, you'll see here on the screen, we have systems installed in Bakersfield. This is a 3-hour system, 96 flow batteries on trackers, DC coupled. In this particular case, the solar system had a 6-year payback for this host facility, but by adding the NEXTracker flow solution brought it down to 3.5 years. So, I mean, and this is not unusual. That's actually a very typical use case. We see that all the time where, you know, you add storage and because of resiliency or demand charge reduction or demand response, there are so many ways to make money and provide a better return on investment for your customer. And all of this can absolutely apply to the NEXTracker drive system, which is our lithium-based system. This is a build-to-order, purpose-built container enclosure, custom enclosure, and it is ISO format, meaning, I mean, this enclosure can ship in and out of any port in the world, and it is like any other ISO container, but this is completely custom from start to finish. It's built to order. You can get it insulated. You can define the metal grade, finish, thickness, whether it's stackable or not. You know, we've done a lot to this enclosure to make it solid and robust structurally, seismically, so that you can stack them. You can put a lot of heavy lithium batteries inside of them, and this thing just ships like nobody's business. This is the slickest. I mean, essentially, you know, the products of, you know, the cells and the modules, and this is one of the things NEXTracker really, you know, we really drilled into, because we didn't want to provide components. We really want to provide the full solution, make this simple. And the way we see this enclosure is this is a delivery system and packaging to get the best-in-class LG, Samsung lithium batteries to the facility as quickly as possible. So everything's included in here. You've got all your regulatory compliances like NFPA 855, UL 9540. You've got fire detection, suppression, and strobes, and of course the cleaning agents, all that fire suppression stuff. You've got AC panels, DC panels, all the surge protection, ground fault that comes along with that. And this, and you could get it with or without an inverter, but with or without the EMS, we've made it very flexible and scalable so that you could essentially plug it into any system or, you know, get it completely wrapped with flex behind it. And then finally, here's an example of a use case with the NEXTracker drive system. You'll see this one is in Fresno, California. The C rate is completely adjustable. We've done anything to, you know, 4C all the way to C over 4, C over 6. So power applications, energy applications, we've seen it and done it. We're shipping this today. And you'll see, actually, this is actually quite similar to the last use case. So this is an example of how both technologies work really well in very similar applications. They are not, there are differences, but there are a lot of similarities, and I encourage you, you know, if you have a project, give us a call, work with us. We'll help select the right technology or the right solution for the right application, because that is really important. There are cases where you may want to use one or the other, and we can drill down into that. So we have systems up in the field running now. You know, this one from NREL is 1 year and going. That's a 1C rate example, DC coupled, with some wind turbines attached to it. Really interesting use case there. And then finally, some photos. We have, you know, 20-foot enclosures, 40-foot, 45-foot, so that, you know, we're able to stack anywhere from low 1 megawatt hours of storage in these enclosures all the way up to even 5.5 megawatt hours in a single enclosure, so that we're really moving as much megawatt hours, getting them commissioned, installed, integrated in the field as quickly as possible. And that's it for me. Thank you so much. Looking forward to answering questions.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, everybody, all of our panelists. We have had a lot of great questions come in. Looking at the clock here, it looks like, of course, we won't be able to get to all of them. Hopefully, we'll be able to keep this conversation going, all the great events that are mentioned earlier on in the webinar. And, of course, our experts will be following up directly with the questions that we aren't able to get around to at the end here. We do have a couple that I've wanted to get through and mark as sort of high priority here. One of them I wanted to hand to you, Brian, and this is on the question of the warranty provisions, kind of the due diligence involved behind a battery energy storage system. What sort of warranty provisions are required here? What does the due diligence look like for systems like these?
Yeah, thanks. The battery storage systems and energy storage as a whole, you know, the requirements typically, they certainly depend on the applications, but what we're seeing is the longevity about 10 years in terms of a simple application. Most battery systems will be designed for at least a 10-year life in today's environment. And with that, the requirements for the system often involve availability guarantees, output and performance guarantees of duration, and not only at beginning of life, but also throughout the entire period, so end of life as well. So there's a wide variety, and most of the top tier companies can provide at least a 10-year warranty, supported by and oftentimes operational and maintenance contracts, and that's sometimes what we get involved with as well. So a variety, but there's the technologies there that people are supporting it and standing behind it, particularly in some of the lithium-ion battery systems that are out there currently.
Great. Janice, we've got one here, actually a couple of questions here on behind-the-meter uptake in the United States that might be on your wheelhouse. The question is generally that there's perception that despite demand charges being high in the United States, it hasn't been as successful a market as we've seen in potentially Europe. Would you agree with that assessment? And if so, what do you think are the reasons for that?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I would say yes and no. In California, we have a very robust behind-the-meter market that was kicked off with an incentive program called the Self-Generation Incentive Program, which is largely for storage. That was originally, the program opened about a year and a half ago. It had about $400+ million in it. So that program is probably spent down by half and is deploying hundreds, thousands of behind-the-meter storage projects in California. California is also deploying behind-the-meter storage for aggregated local capacity procurement, resource adequacy for utilities. So that's a model that's being pioneered here. Elsewhere in the United States, we don't have such generous incentive programs. There are some programs in New York, but generally I would say the barriers, it's not just about cost and incentives, but it's also a question of channel and understanding how do you sell it. How do you create a value proposition in these different markets? Every market is different. And the value proposition for behind-the-meter storage has largely been on demand charge reductions. So you need to have the correct tariff to be able to capture those benefits. There's tariff uncertainty. I would say in the U.S., residential applications are much slower than, say, in Germany. Germany had a really fast uptake on residential solar, largely because they had a lot of PV systems that were either done with their feed-in tariff or the feed-in tariff was higher than the payment lower than their retail tariff. So, absent net metering, it's a great application for behind-the-meter residential. So anyway, just in summary, we do have markets in the U.S. that are hot for behind-the-meter storage in multiple applications and value stacking ones too. But progress across the country, a little slower. It really depends on the region, and there is a myriad of reasons for that. Tariff, design, permitting varies all over the place, and that's a question just of solving that is a question of experience. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Janice. Josh, I'm going to shoot a question here that I'm kind of curious about, and I'm the moderator, so I get to skew things to what I like to hear about. The question is about software, and in particular, how significant is software for solar plus storage? I know a rather big question, but also how does that change when you're talking about a tracking system versus perhaps a standalone solar system?
Great question. Yeah, software, of course, is very important, and not just any software, but NERC CIP compliant cyber-secure software, which, of course, NEXTracker it has already developed for the tracker, and we're bringing that entire infrastructure over to the storage. So actually, as part of our integration efforts, one of the many things we've done is actually taken this our software and our EMS hardware and actually integrated it with the battery. So literally, the battery just looks like another node on our software architecture. So it plugs right into all the existing infrastructure that we already have. And it is important, and it needs to be flexible and adjustable too, because we like to future-proof our systems, which is another reason why the design that the approach that we took is very flexible. Like, for example, the ideal power converter can be reprogrammed to have different AC nameplate ratings, which can be great for self-consumption or for congested feeders, and you need the battery to maybe store more solar and put out less. You know, the time of use rates can change over time. We've seen that in California, for example, and the batteries and the systems can be reprogrammed to discharge or charge at different rates so that we're always optimizing return on investment and project IRR. And what's unique about putting it with a tracker that I think is actually really compelling too, and this is personally actually what got me really interested. You know, anybody can put batteries together with solar, you know, in a simple AC coupled or something in the field. But when you tightly integrate a tracker with a battery, I mean, think of a tracker. A tracker is a controllable solar asset already by virtue of it being a tracker. And it also does some of the work for the battery. It actually shifts time. It broadens the shoulders. And that's what batteries do. They move energy in time. Well, so do trackers. They broaden the shoulders. They move energy. They create more energy in time. And when you put the two together, you can actually get smaller or more cost-effective batteries with a tracker than you otherwise could with, say, a fixed tilt system. And because it's controllable, I mean, you can do, I mean, we're looking at applications with ISOs where they need load, not generation. And because you can tilt the panels a different direction and turn the battery the other way, you know, there's all kinds of control that we have in a tracker plus storage system that you simply wouldn't have with any other system. So software is very critical.
Great. We're a little over time here. We have a ton of good questions. We will be following up with everybody directly to make sure that we get your questions answered. Thank you so much for asking them. I'm going to try to steal 2 more minutes of our very generous panelists' time by asking them a question I like to ask after every webinar. As everybody here goes off to their lunch breaks on the West Coast or maybe starts thinking about heading home to beat the snow up here in Boston, if they're at the water cooler and they see a coworker, and the coworker asks, hey, how was that webinar? I didn't get a chance to watch it. What's the 30-second takeaway that you would have our attendees say from this webinar? And why don't we just go down the horn and see what people think? Josh, any 30-second thoughts? Oh, Josh, we don't have you.
Sorry. Sorry. So the 30-second takeaway would be, you know, cost reduction, accelerated timelines, simplicity. You know, storage is it's a new market and industry for lots of people. A lot of folks are getting their head around it. I would just encourage you, reach out to us. We've done a lot of work for you already. Streamline, low cost, accelerated. Go get the best solution to your customer.
Great. Brian, any 30-second thoughts on your end?
Yeah, I think as you can see, there's continually developing applications for integration of storage systems with renewable energy and conventional systems and power. And so that's going to continue to develop. You see the curve of growth. And the other thing I see, clearly I mentioned earlier, is really convergence of electrification of transportation. That's going to be unique in terms of a new application on how storage and electrification can work together.
Great. Janice, any 30-second thoughts?
Sure. I would say no matter where you sit in the ecosystem today, whether you are a OEM car manufacturer, a developer of gas peakers, a developer of transmission, solar, wind, behind the meter rooftop solar, whether you're a regulator or utility, you cannot afford to not look at how the many diverse solutions and applications of energy storage are going to affect your business, your bottom line, and hopefully the future of our power sector. So I encourage you guys, you've taken the first step. Thank you for listening in. And we are here as a resource, CESA, Stradigen, ESNA. Please don't hesitate to reach out if we can be of assistance. Thank you, and thank you, GTM and NEXTracker.
And thank you to our panelists. We really appreciate it. Hopefully the conversation will continue with all those great events that we'll be having over the next year. Once again, thank you to all our panelists. We'll be following up directly with anyone whose questions weren't answered. And we hope to see you for the next GTM webinar.
Looking forward to it.